Alright, we reviewed the new Iron Maiden. There are no other albums coming out this weekend. Definitely nothing else of value and importance, huh? What's that, Chompy? New Carnifex. You're telling me there's music coming out this weekend that isn't from Iron Maiden? Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I was in a major metal band I would want to release a new album the same weekend as Iron fucking Maiden, because guaranteed it'd be overshadowed, but I don't know, Carnifex are bold, brave, and or stupid motherfuckers. Whatever. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. We got a new Carnifex album, so let's fucking talk about it. Why not? You know what, Chompy? You can actually stay here. Why not? People do love you, after all, and I love you too. And thank you, by the way, for reminding me of Graveside Confessions, the 8th studio album from American deathcore crew Carnifex. Even in my late teens and early 20s, back when I was listening almost exclusively to like 80s hard rock and heavy metal and thrash and some old school death metal, I legitimately had a soft spot in my heart for Carnifex. Maybe it's because I was kind of led to believe that the band was more death metal than deathcore. Carnifex kind of did a lot to distance themselves from that genre, and actively sold merch with phrases like defend death metal lambasted all over it. But the more simplistic and plausible explanation could be that, quite frankly, Carnifex was just more engaging, more brutal, and more consistent. Whatever the reason, Carnifex simply resonated with me more, and as such has grown to become one of my favorite deathcore bands of the 2010s. I'd go as far as to say that their previous studio album, World War X, is perhaps one of the best albums in the entire genre. Every single track on that thing was a certified banger, cram-packed with killer riffs, killer vocals, killer everything, and the production helped elevate Carnifex's very brutal, groove-laden deathcore to more ambitious and apocalyptic territory. It wasn't just Carnifex at their heaviest and at their most confident, it was also Carnifex at their most intelligent and immersive. As such, I've been mildly excited for Graveside Confessions. I wasn't really blown away by any of the promo singles released beforehand, but I was convinced that perhaps Carnifex would find a way to tap into the darkness of the past 2 years and use that to elevate what is already so appealing and brutal about them. And while there are brief moments of Graveside Confessions that come close to capturing what I had envisioned, for the most part, honestly, this album feels like a gigantic step back, as ultimately the album just flat out fails to deliver anything all that interesting or unique or exciting, continuously indulging in the same tropes, cliches, and stereotypes that elitists and gatekeeping metalheads often mock deathcore for, while practically gorging itself on completely unnecessary bells and whistles like some fat American at a Golden Corral. Which isn't to say that there isn't any fun to be had with this record whatsoever, because that isn't the case. I think the first few tracks in particular are loaded with some genuinely enjoyable, if perhaps generic, material. The opening cut and title track Graveside Confessions, for instance, is an especially tight and abrasive slice of blackened deathcore, with a lot of razor-sharp and pummeling guitar hooks and grooves and percussive beatdowns. It's a very grim and nasty and in-your-face cut. It's very bitter. Scott Lewis is on fire vocally here. Quite literally, if you told me he was spewing magma at some point, I might believe you. The following tracks, Pray for Peace and Seven Souls, very wisely build on the momentum of Graveside Confessions with a lot of cutthroat grooves, a lot of very nasty, evil lyrics. There are some electronic beats in Pray for Peace that I think are genuinely pretty sloppy and obnoxious, but for the most part, this is a pretty hellish cut. It does actually feel like something that could have been on World War X. And the track Cursed, for the most part, is pretty fucking fantastic, if we're being honest. It kind of reminds me of what I would expect from, like, Everblack era, the Black Dahlia Murder, but with an emphasis on some modern, brutal, and deathcore influences. There is, however, one moment directly in the middle of this song that almost completely derails the whole thing for me. It's this weird, noisy, electronic, glitchy moment. It kind of feels like something that would have been cut off of a Code Orange demo. I think it's meant to imitate a chainsaw or a motorcycle. I'm not entirely sure what Carnifex's intention is. Here's what I do know. Regardless of what the intention was, what it actually sounds like is a fucking fart, and like a long, nasty, awkward one at that. And I'm not saying this to be childish, to be juvenile. I'm saying this because while I was listening to this song, I legitimately thought, who fucking farted? And unfortunately, from here on, the album goes downhill quickly. All of these bells and whistles I've mentioned, like all the keyboards, the organ pieces, the electronic pieces, the beats, they become very obnoxious. It's very clear that the band is overcompensating for what is ultimately very simplistic meat and potatoes songwriting. The album suddenly devolves into a never-ending display of overproduced, ham-fisted breakdowns, edgy lyrics, and a lot of just really unnecessary nonsense and filler. The track January Nights, for instance, is perhaps the most bland and simplistic instrumental track I've heard on an album in 2021. You could remove this from the album entirely and lose absolutely nothing of substance and value. Period. There's also a cover of Dead Bodies Everywhere, originally written and performed by Korn, which I think is just really, really fucking tacky and soulless. At the very end, you've also got 3 reworked and remixed versions of some older Carnifex songs, which are totally, completely 100% fine. I honestly don't have any opinions on them whatsoever. Honestly, I'm really only mentioning these tracks to illustrate how fatty and bloated this album very quickly becomes. These 3 tracks, the Korn cover, January Nights, quite frankly, a lot of the tracks on here, it's all filler. None of it needs to be here. And none of the bells and whistles need to be here, none of the electronic beats, none of the organ and keyboard pieces, which themselves aren't really that unique. These are all elements that we hear a lot in deathcore nowadays. We heard them very recently on the Lorna Shore EP, used more effectively on that EP, may I add. And before someone says it, no, I don't think this is an issue of me simply growing out of Carnifex, because I re-listened to Slow Death and World War X and a couple other older tracks in preparation for this album review, and honestly, a lot of it holds up really fucking well. This, on the other hand, grew more and more tedious with every listen. It is saved by some strong moments in the first 4 songs and by some consistently great performances, particularly from Scott Lewis, but ultimately still, I would give this a 2 out of 5. This is by no means a lazy or incompetent album. There is a lot of effort visibly on display. The problem is, none of it is really going into the songwriting. All of that effort, all of that time is being spent on the production, on all these keyboard pieces, on all these crazy guitar pieces, on making the album sound brutal rather than making it sound fresh and unique. I've no doubt that for the most part, Carnifex fans will still probably enjoy this. Same goes for anyone looking for a pretty simplistic, straightforward piece of brutal meat and potatoes deathcore. But at this point in my life, I'm looking for something just a little bit more robust, something with a little bit more character and intelligence and ambition. And I'm just not really getting that from Carnifex anymore, at least not on this particular album. So 2 out of 5, is pretty poor if you ask me. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, so you can know immediately what me and Chompy are up to here on this channel. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.